If you're joining me for the first time, this is Before They Get Famous. It's a snazzy TV production. And I'm your host, Alana Tyson. And the title of the show is exactly what it says. It's myself bringing to you innovators and people that I just find to be very influential in the culture or in their industry. And we're just trying to highlight some of these individuals that I think have a really interesting or unique story or a platform that I really just love sharing with the masses. So I know probably have a few followers who have joined me on this journey. And so thank you so much for coming back. And if it's your first time, definitely stick around. So far, Brother Baisden here is my third guest on the show. So this is our third episode, which is really exciting. And we're just going to be bringing a lot more of this to you. So definitely make sure you like and subscribe to Snazzy TV, because that's where you're going to see you're going to see this full interview, and you're going to see more of what Before They Get Famous has to offer. And you'll also see some of the interviews that I did previously. So again, I'm going to welcome, big welcome to Brother Baisden. That's what you go by, Brother Baisden. And before we kind of get into your story, I'm just going to say that, Brother Baisden, you are a scholar and you have a very unique talent, or at least what I thought to be quite unique, something that I had never seen before. And I thought, oh my gosh, I really need to share your story with the world and with the internet. And so I hope you're okay with me calling you this. You are an artist of the spoken word. Is that sound good?
That's that's 100% fair. I'll take that. I've been called worse things, so that's a good one.
Yeah, I love the way that sounds. It just sounds so rich, and because words are rich, right? And they create a culture, they create a vibe, they create a feeling. And so when we talk about spoken word, we want to, we're invoking all of those things. So just some people say poetry or poet, but I like to say artist of the spoken word. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into what you do and what drew me to you, what drew me to your page, and what I hope will draw others to what you have to share with the world as well. But before we get into your story, I'm going to do some shout outs real quick, because that is a significant feature of this show. Every episode with Before They Get Famous, we like to do what I call shout outs, which is basically shouting out, supporting other creators, other influencers, people who I find to be doing something unique, or just not even revolutionary, but just people who are putting their work or their influence out in the world to make change in some small way. So my first one is actually, this is a different one because I've never shouted out a person before, but I'm actually going to be shouting out a gentleman by the name of Dr. Andre Perry. And you can go ahead and Google him, Dr. Andre M. Perry. He is a scholar, he is an author, he is an advocate for civil rights. He is a lot of things. He's an educator, but I'm talking about Andre Perry this morning because one, I actually studied with Andre Perry I recall when he was getting his PhD at the University of Maryland. I was attending at the same time. And so I got to know him at that point in time. But why I'm bringing him up here during the shout out is because he's been all over the place discussing education rights and equality and inclusion as it relates to economic empowerment. And I thought that was very relevant to what you do, Brother Baisden. And so Dr. Perry has a new book out. And so I would encourage folks to take a look at his new book. I'm going to read it here because I want to make sure I get the title right. So he has a new book out called Know Your Price: Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. So shout out to, again, Dr. Andre Perry, who is a colleague and a former former alumni as me of University of Maryland College Park. So that is my first shout out. And then my other shout out is kind of keeping in that same vein. I'm shouting out a group actually called Black Creators in KidLit, as in kids literature. So Black Creators in KidLit is a group that was started on Twitter, and they have just really, really taken off. It's absolutely amazing what one person can do. It literally started off with one gentleman saying, you know what, I have a bunch of friends. We all write, we all are illustrators in the children's literature genre, and we got questions and we can't get published. And so literally maybe 2 or 3 individuals just put it out there in the ether, and they've grown tremendously. So Black Creators in KidLit, shout out to them. All right, and that's my 2. Brother Baisden, do you have any?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to a couple of organizations and some people. First and foremost, I'm giving a shout out to my mom, Olivia Baisden. Without her, there would be no me, right? I like to think of myself as, the CEO of Brother Baisden, of Brother Baisden Enterprises, the whole thought process. But without an executive leader, which is my mom, there would be no CEO, right? So kudos to her. I also want to give a couple shout outs to some organizations that I deeply align with from a mission perspective, as well as some professional connections. So we got the NAIC, we got the Executive Leadership Council, we got Accelerate Investors, we got SEO, we got Black Capital Management, and there's a whole host of other organizations that kind of follow the same type of mold. But effectively, the reason why I'm shouting out these organizations is because they're all, in some way, shape, or form, dedicated to making sure that Black and brown people who are of talent can make it and have as many opportunities in the economic landscape as possible. So whether that's, feeder organizations for, professional jobs, whether it's, getting together with networks and making things happen through that kind of way. All of these organizations I've either benefited from directly or indirectly by being a participant in. And last but not least, I just want to give a shout out to all my mentors, my aunties, if you will, all of the people that have been extremely helpful in pivoting or shaping rather, just my trajectory and my success thus forward. Kind of like how the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, like the same thing kind of goes in my world. Nobody can make it in this world alone. And I don't want anybody to get deterred and think that, when I talk about certain things or because my life may look a certain kind of way, that, it's an entirely pick yourself up by the bootstraps kind of thing. That may be true to a certain extent, but, there's been people who have stopped everything they're doing to take out an hour to say, hey, Kev, let me help you with this. Or like, hey, Kev, let me introduce you to this person, etc. And so, without that, I probably wouldn't be here. And so I just want to take some time to make sure I acknowledge all of those folks. And if I didn't name you, you know that you've been named in spirit.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. And so, let's get into it. So again, thank you so much, Kevin. I know you have a lot going on. You are a scholar first and foremost. And so again, thank you so much for taking just a little bit of time. And everything that you said leads us up to this point where this is the reason that I even started doing this show. And I'll let you define what it is you do, but I'll just kind of preface it by saying, I discovered, through mutual contacts that we have, is how I came to know you. But at that point in time, I did not know about this very unique talent that you have. It wasn't until I decided to, as you always do, you follow somebody on IG and you say, oh, I'm just going to, follow this person and say, hey, every now and then. But as I'm learning about you and following your page and seeing the things that you post, I came across this amazing spoken word that you do. And, why you on this show as opposed to someone else? I'm sure there's lots of people out there say, well, I do spoken word, I could be on the show, can I? And that very well may be true. But when I started watching your IG and watching your sermons, as you call them, you were using words that I had never heard before in spoken word. You were talking about things that I had never heard anyone talk about in spoken word. And I just found it to be very, very fascinating and interesting. And I really, really wanted to kind of get inside your head and learn a little bit more about that. And, you know, you started doing these, at least where I saw, in classrooms. And that was something else that was very different to me. I was like, well, why is he doing spoken word in a classroom with a chalkboard? So you call yourself the Reverend, right? And so I'm just going to kind of let you describe to the people what it is you do in your
Okay.
own words.
Okay. So I think you captured most of it. It's spoken word, it's poetry, it's a cultural expression of what's going on up here, right? And I got this term Baisdenomics, which is also my handle on Instagram, and Baisdenomics is the theory of Kevin, the theory of Pastor Baisden, the theory of the Reverend, the theory of this guy who has an extremely vivid imagination, but that isn't afraid to express it. And I think if you just want to talk about the origin story, because you mentioned the classroom tip, right?
Yes.
My first handful of
Shifting again.
videos,
Sorry.
yeah, my first handful of videos, it really kind of started out as me and a bunch of my friends from school, just kind of like horsing around while we're studying. I mean, like, so I went to Columbia,
Yes.
and I studied economics and philosophy, and like to put it in a nutshell, the the workload was insane and the expectation was brilliance. So like there was never really any spare time, but we always needed to like decompress. And so I found that, when we were studying, we would kind of joke about the things that we were studying. And so I think the video that you're referring to with the equations in the background, right? I took this class called symbolic logic. Symbolic logic is just a bunch of formulas and ways to deduce a statement into like an argument,
Okay.
and it comes with a whole host of
And it's
squiggly lines. Yeah.
so you said symbolic.
Symbolic logic, yeah.
Symbolic logic. Okay.
And so I figured out that if I made these videos about the things that I was studying, I would actually learn the material a lot quicker. It's kind of funny because when I was a kid, right, in elementary school, my mom used to always tell us, like, oh my God, if you all knew that math work, like these rap songs, you all
Oh
would
yeah.
be geniuses. And she was right. She was
Yes. A lot
100%
of
right.
people have discovered that. Yes.
Right. And so, like, when I would study, whether it was philosophy, whether it was logic, whether it was game theory, economics, right, I would weave in the terms into a rhyme scheme or almost like a rap, but in a spoken word format. And I would actually digest the videos and the material just like this. And I started killing it on exams. And I was like, we might be
Wow.
on to something. And then like we started posting the videos, right? We started posting the videos, people started liking them. I would get inbounds like, wow, Kev, this is dope. I really like the stuff that you're saying, etc. But another thing, and like none of this was intended, but it was a couple of my classmates that they said that they would watch some of these videos before their exams and they would actually start learning stuff from them. And they would do pretty well in their exams. So I was like, well, what if I started making videos about the things that I do in my profession, right? So, my day job, I'm an investor at an investment management firm. Long story short, we invest in a wide array of things, and people try to convince us to write a huge check to invest in, you know, um, their funds and their strategies. And so, prior to this, I'd worked at a couple other investing roles, so hedge funds, asset owners, et cetera. And I'm like, okay, well, what I've learned through all of this is
Mhm.
that the power of Wall Street is real. in
Mm.
like a very material way. Like,
Right.
and through all of that, you get all of this jargon, right? So you get
Yes.
bonds, you get tranches, you get cash flow statements, you get, all of these different things that
Hmm.
sound so foreign to a lot of people. And
Yes.
none of it is rocket science. Like none of it is rocket science. All
Mm.
it is jargon and a bunch of terms that, in my view, right, is designed to keep the space inaccessible to people who already don't know about it, right? That's
Mm.
just what it is.
Wow.
If it's by design or if it's by happenstance, I don't know. But if we look historically, we can probably say that
Right.
it might be by design.
And I think you're indeed that is true, because even as I consider myself a pretty intelligent person. I went to grad school. you know, it is intimidating if you don't, when you start to hear these terms like hedge fund and, bull and bear and, blue chips and NASDAQ. And, it really is like a totally different language if you are
Mhm.
not in that environment. And to the extent where it seems so foreign that you just want to stay away.
Exactly, exactly. And I don't think it has anything to do with core intelligence because I have a number of, people in my circle, whether it's corporate attorneys or, leaders in the educational world or, very high profile, highly educated type of individuals who will openly admit like, hey, this finance thing, this investing thing, like I don't know. Like if I got the type of money where I can hire a financial advisor, I'll let them deal with it. And if not, then, it is what it is.
Right.
And I think because my spoken word initially, originated out of a learning experience and a learning instrument, like now I tend to use my spoken word as a platform for financial inclusion, financial literacy, and to bridge the gap in knowledge between the haves and like the have-nots, right?
Mhm.
Um, and like the highlight of my day, right, is when I post a video and I'm talking about, a bond structure or debt pay down or whatever. And, some guy that I grew up with DMs me and he's like, yo, Kev, I Googled a few things after, I saw your video and now I opened up a Robinhood. Can we hop on a
Mm.
call so we can talk about how to work this Robinhood thing? Like that's
Right.
the highlight of my day
Yes.
because it means that, A, the target audience was reached, and B, there was an impact so much so that somebody is willing to say, you know what, whatever else I got going on, let me
Hmm.
just put that on hold so that way I can invest in myself and invest in my future.
Right.
And, at scale, right? And, if I
Hmm.
was a global, influencer or whatever,
Right.
then just given how sometimes there is an exaggerated influence on entertainers and artists in certain communities, right? Maybe some kid who's about to go out and do something for survival, for economic survival, that
Mm.
may be on the other side of the law, maybe he might just take a step back and say, hold up, I got $30 right here. I can
Mm.
put this in the Robinhood. And according to, some stuff that I've seen in the news and understanding what Pastor Baisden is saying,
Right.
I might have $45 in the next 6 months, right?
Hmm.
And that may be one less package of drugs sold. That might be one less gun to be carried around.
Right.
And of course, these are hypotheticals, but that's kind of like the way that the world works, right? If you're given an incentive to do something where the benefit outweighs the risk of you doing something bad, then you're going to do it. And if that's not the case, then you're going to keep on what you're doing and get the results that you've been getting. And so, what I aim to do is to create that extra incentive that mitigates the risk of you doing something to get in trouble. That's what
Mm.
Baisdenomics is about. That's what the poetry
Right.
is about. That's what the spoken word is about. Simple as that.
Right. Wow. I love it. I love it. Baisdenomics.
Baisdenomics.
Have you trademarked that?
I haven't. Maybe I
You
should.
need to.
Maybe I should.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about your, because I think this is something that resonates, I think, with a lot of the audience and a lot of what Dr. Perry uh, researches about policy as it relates to education. And we talked about this a little bit, but I'm not going to get too much into your history as it relates to education, your educational background, but I think it's important part of your story, because after folks have heard you a little bit and after they hear a little bit more about, when you do your performance, for me and for us, growing up in grade school, you, much like a lot of Black males in the education system, were labeled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you could talk a little bit about that, just in terms of, how do you think that how do you think that influences what you do today? Because clearly you are, I would dare say, brilliant.
Thank you.
And I
Thank
think the
you.
audience is going to, see that in a little bit, once you do your spoken word, or once they follow you on IG. But I really feel like that's an important part of your story when you look at your history and when you look at where you are today. Clearly, you were not that child that they were probably trying to make you out to be. And I have my own stories as a mom of two Black boys, but we know that the system is definitely not, you know, not in our favor when it comes to educating, specifically with Black males.
Mhm.
So how do you feel like that has influenced you in terms of where you are today?
So
I mean, you have
it's
two degrees from Columbia University, for Christ's
yeah. I mean,
sake.
I did a double major in economics and philosophy. I went to a good school,
Mhm.
so I get it. Let's just say baseline. I'm smart, right?
Yeah,
The thing is, when we talked about education, I'll speak briefly
sure.
to my childhood and education. So, I got labeled as disruptive, as problematic. He's not conformative. He doesn't operate within the bounds of the social structure of the classroom, right? And because of that, right, I was, you know, my parents were encouraged to put me into an alternative educational setting. And I think, looking back on it, if we just bar the labels on it, right? Like, forget about all of the labels that came along with that process.
Right.
If we just look at the end result was I was in a classroom that I was not conforming to, right? And then I was brought into a more specialized situation. In this specialized situation, it was discovered by one of my teachers that, okay, this is not a bad kid. This is not a disruptive kid. This is not a kid who, reads like the report that we just received from the Board of Education. This is a kid that just hasn't been challenged. He hasn't
Right.
been challenged. And so
Mhm.
because he's bored, because you all want to tell him about the pilgrims and the natives and all of these
Mhm.
lies that are being propagated, of course
Right.
he's disruptive because he doesn't care. He already knows this stuff. And so it was saw fit to have me tested on an aptitude level to see if I was even in the right grade, right? And what ended up happening was, I took all of the tests and I scored, much higher than the grade level that I should have been performing on. So they skipped me a grade. They skipped me a
Mm.
grade. And then,
Wow.
even though they skipped me a grade because I was in that specialized setting, I want to say that the teacher had a daughter that was in college. And so they would bring in her college textbooks after she was, finished with them, and they would instruct me with those. And that kept me busy, right?
Mhm.
That kept me busy. And so, kind of leading up until today, right? I think it's good to be a nonconformist, to not want to follow this herd mentality, because for all intents and purposes, every success that I've had in my life has not been because I've been following the quote unquote norms and rules, right?
I always want to hear part of my guests' struggle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so important to share that part of your story, because it everything is not always rosy, and if anybody who's watching this who has found themselves in that same place, labeled, or told that they couldn't do X, Y, and Z, but you on the inside, the things that you're capable of. you know. So thanks for sharing that. So you're going to do some spoken word, right?
I am.
For us, right? I'm excited. Um, I'll kind of let you. I'll kind of just let you flow. Then I'll let you do that.
So this is a piece I call real assets.
Real assets. Okay. All right.
Real assets.
All right. I gotta get ready for this.
Okay. So, and apologies if I'm looking away, but I got like
That's
multiple
okay.
monitors.
No, I'm listening. I'm listening. I'm
Okay.
not looking.
Cool. 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 So, real assets by Baisden. I'm a contrarian and nonconformist. Enormous warrants and the endorsements are enormous. There's only two things I care about in this world: promote structures and credit performance. Let's run 1031s, OZs, never sell, and get a cap gain step up. Or give me 2 points, a 10 on the sixth pref, and 80 on the catch up. I might cop a tranche on the CLO, but that's expensive. So I levered up and bought a pack of solar panel tax incentives. I'm buying things from the widest range. Environmentalists, plus I'm getting carry off of climate change. Delaware, where the Cayman is where it's held at. My management company bullied the LPAT. Pescatarian, but I might take your equity stake out. Hit the mezzanine with a 40 for the takeout. Get the seniors out of the deal like they graduated. Do a renovation, depreciate it, and aggregate it. Underwrite the B piece and pull a mortgage out. Screaming out my number, falling out, foaming at the mouth. That's how we do it. That's real assets. Real assets. Pastor Baisden, all day. All day.
Oh my gosh. Pastor Baisden, I swear I could listen to this all day. Seriously. It's just like, oh my gosh. Like this is so, oh my gosh, the talent is just ridiculous.
Thank you.
Okay, how long did it take you to write that?
Honestly, 20 minutes.
Okay. You know what? and that was called High Asset? No, what was
real
that?
Assets.
Real assets. Real assets. Wow.
Real assets.
Oh my gosh,
so,
that
so
pescatarian piece there.
Take an equity stake out. What do I need to eat meat for when I can take an equity stake out? Come on, man. Stop playing.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Let me come down off the high real quick. Okay. So who is your intended audience? Do you ever really have an intended audience when you do these?
I think the audience is who's ever willing to listen, right? And listen attentively. That being said, I think if I'm giving a more targeted response, the intended audience is someone who may not be familiar with the content or the concepts that I'm speaking of, but when they hear it, it's almost kind of like that delayed impact response where it's like, hold up. What did he just say? Let me Google that.
Right.
Like those are the people that I want to hear what I have to say and pay attention to it, right? Because those are the people that I'm trying to impact. Simple as that.
Okay. All right. So are you planning to, I would love to see you perform these like more and larger capacity. Is that your plan?
I wouldn't say that that's a plan, right? Because so like a bunch of my people in my circle are like, Kev, you need to be in entertainment. You need a YouTube channel, you need to be out on the road, you need to be doing all of this stuff. And that may be true, but ultimately, like this is something that I'm just passionate about, right? Yeah. If I get a huge amount of exposure, if I get an endorsement behind like whatever, that's just icing on the cake. I just like writing and talking about things that I'm passionate about. So of course, like the situation that you were mentioning, I just so happened to be at an event for Black History Month, and they had a bunch of other artists up there, showcasing their talent or whatever. I was like, all right, cool, I got some stuff. Let's run it. Let's do it. And like, yeah, will I be focusing my attention going forward to maybe, being a little bit more intentional about finding out, seeking out those opportunities? Probably so. But like, this is not, I want to make this super clear. this is not something that I'm trying to do that I'm trying to do because I want a record deal, because I want to sell,
Right.
multi-platinum. Like
That's
I don't
important to
care about
know.
any of that.
Exactly.
I don't care about any of that. If it came my way and I had the time to do it, of course, I would entertain it. But
Right.
like, this is just about the culture. This is about my passion. And this is about
Yeah.
speaking from the heart.
And this is
Simple as that.
about it's about creating an outlet for you as well, right?
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
I think we talked in a lot of your time. I think the majority of your time is spent studying, um, and God forbid we don't want to take away from that. But this is just so rich, It's just, and it's so rare, I mean, you just don't see this type of spoken word, with people doing spoken word about economy.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever seen it anywhere. That's not to say
Yeah.
it doesn't exist, but I've never seen it.
I, I,
So
I, I got another piece, if you wouldn't mind, and it's
I
super short.
I was going to ask you,
Okay.
definitely, can you please share another one?
Okay. So here's another one, right? Called "They Don't Care."
No.
They don't care, right? So they laughed the CFO outright to his face at the pizza party. They don't care. Whole clip, broad day, no aim. They don't care. Blow trees on the subway, people looking at them like they crazy. They don't care. Will stay or write anything so long as they believe it sounds dope. They don't care. Get a wide receiver number and do it standing on their head. They don't care. Get to rumbling with the bailiffs right in front of the judge. They don't care. Will jump bail knowing somebody put up their house. They don't care. Put big tattoos on their necks and their hands. They don't care. Will take the case to trial knowing they red-handed. They don't care. Rocking $1,000 jacket to the HRA office. They don't care. Resorting to violence over basketball. They don't care. And if you ask them straight up if they care, they'll tell you, we don't care. Got it all and act like they never had nothing. Got nothing, act like they got it all. Indoctrinated and drip. Therefore, their first sacrament was the ball. Why do you care? Really, why do you care? Is it guilt cloaked to charity? Who told you to care? Was it your conscience? Was it someone else? Really, who told you? Who told them not to care? Was it society? Was it the voice of trauma? Really, who told them? Why do you care? Why don't they care? Let me ask you a question. If you never saw a way out, would you care? Why don't they care? Let me ask you a question. If you witness people you grew up with vanish in the thin air, would you care? Why don't they care? Let me get straight to the point. All of your heroes called the final fade had their freedom forfeited, all assets seized, families deconstructed, villainized, criminalized, etc., etc., etc. Would you still care? Better yet, you got the nerve to ask me a bit about them not caring. Stop it, please. You don't care. You don't.
Wow.
So this is,
Ooh, that's
and
heavy.
thank you. I brought
Wow.
this one in to show you the range, because it's
Wow.
not just about money. This
Right.
is not just about financial inclusion and economic empowerment. This is about addressing the systemic issues that we have as a society, right? And so
Yes.
before anybody is quick to pass judgment, it's and this is like the inner philosopher coming out of me, right?
Sure.
So when we talk about arguments, we have the premises and the conclusion. And the conclusion always follows the premises, right? I think in today's society, people think that the conclusion, which is the end result, is the argument itself. And they forget to look at the premises. What this they don't care addresses is the premises. And if you can take a look at the premises and actually understand them, then you have reason to believe that the conclusion is nobody's fault, right? The
Mm,
conclusion is a result of all of these other things, right? And so until we're willing to address the premises, which is all of these other things,
right.
then I don't want to hear you talking about why is the conclusion the way it is. I don't want to hear it.
Mm, wow. Ooh, okay. How long did it take you to write that?
This one, maybe an hour,
Maybe an hour. Okay.
about an hour.
Wow. And do you, Brother Baisden, when you are moved to write something, is it usually something that has sat on your heart for quite a while, Or I guess it could be a lot of different things that move you to write a particular sermon or passage.
I think
Does.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's always something percolating up here and right here, right? But I think the inspiration to write is typically triggered by something, right? And so it could be triggered by a deal that I saw that somebody did in the Wall Street Journal. It could be something that
Okay.
was triggered by, um, you know, another episode of police brutality. It could have been something that was triggered by, a whole host of things, and then that's the linchpin and the catalyst to get all of the creative juices bubbling. And so I'm not the type of writer that I'm like, okay, cool, I'm gonna sit down for 2 hours on Saturday afternoon and I'm gonna write and I'm
And
gonna dump something off.
yeah,
That's just not how I work. I'm
right.
more the type like, I always have some stuff going on and I might be walking down the street and I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like that. If I get 20 minutes later on tonight, I'll put it
Right.
down.
Put it
And then
down.
I'll just put it down.
Wow. How many pieces well, how would you say is the size of your collection right now?
I want to say I have maybe 15 to 25 pieces written, and some of it is philosophy, some of
Hmm.
it's spoken word, some of it is, a little bit of the in between. And so eventually, right, I'm trying to get this book in order. And maybe this is a shout out to myself and encouraging myself to actually get the book done. But eventually, I want to publish a volume that has a few philosophical pieces, some of the spoken word, and a preface that kind of talks about why the book is written the way that it is. And maybe I thought 2020 was going to be the year to get that done.
Yeah.
2020 has done a lot of things to a lot of people, so maybe 2021 will be the year that the book will be completed. But yeah.
Yeah, but I would love to hear more, but I wouldn't dare ask you to do another one because we're running out on time. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're a very busy man. But one thing I did want you to touch on, because I thought this was really interesting. When we talked previously, you talked about the language, right?
Mm-hmm.
The language of economy and philosophy, your two fields of study. But you compared that to Wu-Tang,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So so
Yes.
so so it's kind of funny. Me and the guys that I run around with, most of our lingo is highly cryptic, very
Yeah.
coded. And if you don't hang out with us on a regular basis, you come into a conversation, you're like, what are these guys talking about? Like he's talking about a juice, he's talking about a promote, he's talking about running a fund. Like what is he saying? And a lot of the pieces are written in this same type of dialect, if you will.
Yeah.
And I can remember I was on a trip when we could actually still go on trips and be around other people.
Yeah, I miss that.
Um, I did a piece of my spoken word, and somebody was like, "Hey, like we don't get it. It's super cryptic. Like what does it mean?" And then so I took a little bit of time and broke it down, and they finally understood it. And but the thing is, I kind of liken it to Wu Tang because they're talking about Shaolin, they're talking about knives and swords and the 36 chambers, and you would think it was a kung fu movie, right?
Right.
But like if you are a Wu Tang enthusiast, you know exactly what these dudes talking about. So if you're well versed in Baisdenomics, you know what I'm talking about when I say it's a juice. You know what I'm talking about when I say it's a promote structure. You know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about 1031s and OZs. When I say OZs, I'm not talking about ounces of drugs. I'm talking about qualified opportunity zones, right? Tax havens and affordable housing. Like that's what we're talking about. And so
Mhm.
the reason why it's cryptic, right, to a certain extent, is if you hear it and you're inspired by it, go look up what an OZ is.
Exactly.
Go look up what a 1031 is. And you'll find yourself in this rabbit hole of actually learning about real estate. If you're like, what is a solar panel tax incentive? You Google it, and now you're interested in like residential solar homes, right? And how you can get government subsidies and maybe even some other tax incentives by strapping a solar panel to your house, right? Like as simple
Right.
as that,
Right.
right?
Wow. And okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap things up. And thank you so
Okay.
much. Thank you so much again. I just want to definitely tell my audience, please go and check out this brother Baisden, Pastor Baisden. Actually, okay, real quick. Can you
Okay.
tell the people why you refer to yourself as pastor?
So we use terms in nomenclature in our group of religious significance, right? So, Pastor Baisden, Minister Eric, Rabbi Taj, the bishop, the pope, all of this other stuff, right? And part of it is because historically, and this dates back into the Holy Roman Empire and things like that. The the religious organization was typically the origin of literacy, the origin of commerce, and the nucleus of power, right? And then if we
Right.
bring it up until recent American history, and especially in the Black community, the minister Louis Farrakhan, right? The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King,
Right.
right? The brother minister Malcolm X, right? These guys, right, who I would say some of whom are, guys that I kind of looked up to and read a lot about, their religious influence and their impact carried well beyond the temple, well beyond the church, and into the community, right? And these were guys that were able to bring people together. And so for me, it's nothing religious about me being called Pastor Baisden. It's an exercise of leadership and authority over Baisdenomics.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it, Pastor. I love it. Pastor Baisden. That's what I'm talking about. And it's amazing, like you said, you find yourself going down this rabbit hole just from listening to something that you've put out there. Just in preparing for this interview, I looked up, I was like, well, what the bull and bear? Because, we hear those terms all the time. I had no idea that was related to how those animals uh, hunt.
Exactly.
Right? I had no idea. I don't know. I don't know what I ever thought it was. I was just like, maybe it's just a symbolic thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
literally the way, the market moves based on, the bull who, hunts with the horns up, and the bear who,
Yeah.
goes down with the fish. So and it's just amazing the things that you will learn if you put yourself in an environment to do so.
it's
So
it's it's, it's super funny, and I like say this in closing, but when you mention that, so I also cover like natural resources in my work, which is oil, gas,
yeah.
you know anything that you can grab out of the earth and make some type of profit off of. And they have this concept in energy called the rule of capture, and it originally comes from British fowl hunting. And so the saying goes, the rule of capture, if I'm hunting a bird and it just so happens to fly over the fence on your property, and I shoot the bird, it's my bird, right? Even though it landed on your land. And it
Huh.
may sound counterintuitive, but in the energy world, you have like these land leases. So, like, let's say you're living on some land that underneath of it has a whole bunch of oil. You're
Mm,
technically, it's your right to dig up all of that oil, and it's
mm.
yours. However, do you have $30 million to bring an exploration crew and all this other stuff in? I don't know
Right.
if you do, but most people don't.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to pay you a land lease to dig underneath your ground, and it foregoes the rule of capture. So that way I can grab all of the resources, pay you off on the land lease to keep it moving. And so I just mentioned that because when you said the bull and the bear and the hunting, it
Mm,
thought of something else that
yeah.
kind of comes up in my world that's also related to hunting.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Wow. Well, awesome. Again, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up because I know you've got a busy day. It's
I do.
afternoon. It's afternoon there for you. I'm in the Bay Area, so it's still kind of early here, and you're in New
Hmm.
York. So thank
Absolutely.
you once again. I've adapted because I normally like doing my interviews in person. I am a independent journalist, and as much as I love that interaction and that feeling that you get from being in a room with someone, you feed off of that energy. We're just not able to do that with COVID, but at least this way it allows me to speak to more people. So
I was just going to say thank you again for having me on the show. I mean, I'm honored to be a part of this, and
yeah.
yeah, it's just some really cool stuff. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you again so much. I implore everybody, please go and check out Brother Baisden's, Pastor Baisden's IG. I will be putting all the descriptions, and I'll put all of his information, my information, the show's information in the description box. And so you can gather up all of that. Again, I implore you to follow this man. This young brother is really exceptional talent. So thanks once again. We're just wrapping up another episode here of Before They Get Famous. All right. We've been blessed. Thank you, Pastor Baisden.
Thank you. Thank you.